Good morning. Our scripture this morning is from the book of Matthew, chapter 13. Jesus presented another parable to those gathered. The kingdom of heaven is like a farmer who sowed good seed in a field. While everyone was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat, and then made off. When the crop began to mature and yield grain, the weeds became evident as well. The farmer's workers came and asked, "Did you not sow good seed in your field? Where are the weeds coming from?" The farmer replied, "I've seen enemies' hands in this." They in turn asked, "Do you want us to go out and pull them up?" "No," replied the farmer. "If you pull up the weeds, you might take the wheat along with them. Let them grow together until the harvest. Then at harvest time, I will order the harvesters first to collect the weeds and bundle them up to burn, then to gather the wheat into my barn." Ancient words from our tradition for present-day consideration.
Unfortunately, my tickly little cough has come back, so that's a pain for y'all as much as it is for me. But it's the season, so I'm apologizing in advance. That's why I put the tea up there, so hopefully it'll be minimal. We are in the middle of a very strange sermon series. I guess most of them are, but what I'm attempting to do here, and I'm saying this particularly if you've just walked in and you kind of get whacked in the face with this. I've always believed that the parables are much more radical than is presented in the church. They're attempts to really change how we perceive things. Because what we don't realize is we look at the world through habits. We look at the world through instincts, through prejudice, through things sometimes we don't even realize we have. And the bad thing about any kind of prejudice is you can't see it because it's the lens out of which you're looking. So when you try to test yourself, you always wind up being right. Right? Because you don't have a standard outside of yourself to measure and test. All of us start off thinking that we're the center of the universe. And we learn ways of disguising that. But we ask questions like, why did this happen to me? That's very natural, very normal. But doesn't that assume that the universe is sort of a stage on which you are kind of the star, and that you can make sense of the entire evolutionary cosmic process in terms of your own biographical life? Now, I think it's important to make sense of life from your center, from life as you live it. But I believe Christ is trying to help us have a radical transformation where we realize we are part of a larger life. And what we think of as ourself is a vessel. It's a cell in a common body. And we're not getting out of here alive. So we either give ourselves to our highest value or we spend our entire lives trying to escape from pain, sickness, and death. From time to time, I say this. I'm stealing it from somebody, but I can't remember who. That's when you get old, that's one of the benefits. But at some point, you either die for something or of something. But at some point, we either give our lives or we just do a holding action. So I believe Christ understands where we're coming from with the parables, but is trying to help us have a rear view mirror to see what we can't see behind us, have something that widens pictures. It's like a hall of mirrors where it stretches everything out so that we're able to perceive deeper and wider perception of the world and of ourselves. If we just look at the parables as they're sort of like folky kind of lessons at the surface level, if we take the Bible literally at the surface level, it can be the most horrific book in the world. It can be horrifying. Our story today is often interpreted, when I was a kid, it was interpreted that the church has good people and bad people in it. You're the good person, the person sitting next to you is the suspect, right? I mean, the assumption is always that you're, the good people that Jesus is talking about. And so a farmer, often thought to be Jesus, plants good seeds. And some people think that's the good people of the world. And then an evil person comes and plants the bad seeds. That's sometimes called the tare. The wheat is the good seed, the tare is the bad seed, and those plants look very much the same. And so in the story it says, don't pull up the weeds, the tares, because you'll take out some of the wheat with you. But don't worry, because the angels are going to come and torture those people for all eternity. Such a charming story. Such a loving story. I believe Jesus was talking about something much deeper. At least I sure hope so. Jesus was only able to teach for 3 years. So it's understandable a lot of the followers would not have a real good grasp on how deep he was. I mean, I think that's kind of a given. I think some of them get it, some of them don't. And it's all kind of being put together by committee. Decades later. And so I think that we have not only the right to interpret these things with love, I think we have the duty to do that. And not just any love, it's the love that grows into justice, the love that grows into courage, the love that grows into moderation, the love that grows into wisdom. If it does not do those things, that's not what Jesus is talking about in the parables, I think. Again, you're always free to disagree. I'll miss you in heaven, but it's not my problem. Or maybe you'll need to drop me some ice cream if you're right and I'm wrong. But I don't think there's really a hell. I don't think there's really a demon. The devil. I don't think that people are tortured. How could you enjoy heaven if you knew that people who simply were born in a different place and didn't get to hear this message were being tortured beneath your feet? And then you had the angel say, well, don't worry about that. Don't listen to those muffled cries beneath your feet. Enjoy your meal. It almost sounds like Monty Python. This is supposed to be a happy occasion. Let's not spoil it all. So, I believe what the parable is talking about is how do we deal with the fact that life can be so unfair? The seeds may be other people, but it may be parts of ourselves. It may be experiences that we have. There's nothing in the parable that says it's good and bad people. I think coming to terms with ourselves is a pretty full-time curriculum. If we can come to terms with the weeds in ourselves, what are the beliefs? What are the practices? What are the habits that choke out life within us, that have no nourishment for us? That's what the weeds symbolize, I believe. So we're going to look at several factors here. I think the first is that life is a balance of what we like and what we don't like, and there's no way around that. Life is a combination of what we love, what we hate, what we hope for, what we fear. And there's absolutely no way around that. If you have a religion that tries to simplify it and make everything like Disney World, you're just going to have to ignore a whole lot of stuff. We're going to be looking to kind of get the jolt here. Could we look at the Escher here, I think, is talking about the life process. This isn't a Disney cartoon, right? Animals have to eat each other to live. right? They have to hunt each other. What plants breathe out, we breathe in, and vice versa. And what I like about this is that the light and the dark intertwine. You can't have one without the other. And the fish kind of become birds. The birds are developing the space between the fish and vice versa. We have to realize that we are ecological beings. We are not these individuals that kind of the Western Enlightenment said. We are interwoven. And one of the ways of understanding the word spirit is it's the interwovenness of things. It's the breath, it's the circulation of the blood. It flows between us. It connects us, whether we want to or not. Another kind of scary slide, if we could go to that, very briefly, because I didn't look real carefully at this, and it's got some naughty pieces in it, which you're all looking for right now. I shouldn't. So if you look, once again, the light and the dark are absolutely complementary. You cannot have one without the other. And the species, you look like you have to alternate between the species you can see when you're looking at the dark figures and the species that you can see, although there is a guitar in there. So could we go to the next one before I lose my job? And this is, again, the symbol of the vortex, the symbol of the cup, the symbol of the cave, the tunnel, not the tunnel, but caves, wells. We've looked at that image in the parables a number of different ways. But one of the universal religious symbols is a circle with a cross in the middle. And I kind of see it that way, sort of like a kaleidoscope with the species coming out of that. And to realize that peace for us is living in the center of that storm. But you can't get out of the storm. We don't get out of here alive. Life is always a mixture of what we want and what we don't want, what we hope and what we fear. But we can develop a taste for that. Our choices are to go, to just try to pretend like the bad isn't happening or the good isn't happening. Say it's all good, it's all bad. The other is to realize to develop the taste for sweet and sour. Like Chinese food, when you first eat it with a Western palate, it's kind of uncomfortable. But it becomes wonderful to realize that there are tastes in between sweet and sour. And I think life kind of alternates, and to realize that and to not be thrown off by that. The naturalist John Muir said it this way. Well, okay. Whoever stole my reading glasses. I'm kidding. It's in there. No, it's not. Okay. Are they two? Wait, I found them. Yes, thank you. Apparently the thief put them back in my pocket. Okay. John Muir said, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. Then he said, nature's ever at work, building and pulling down, creating and destroying, keeping everything whirling and flowing, allowing no rest, but in beautiful rhythmic motion, chasing everything in endless song out of one beautiful form into another. That's a shame when you study John Muir that his politics were really, he was not able to have that compassion for human beings that he found for nature. But the idea is that life is always sweet and sour. And if we realize that, we can cope with it. That's really not a problem as long as we realize that's what it is. When you first were thinking about getting married, is there anybody here, and you don't raise your hand, is there anybody here who thought if I could just get married, I'll be 100% happy the rest of my life? And if I can't get married, I'll be 100% unhappy. And then 2 years down the road, you realize everything is a mixture. That every person is a mixture of what we hope for, what we fear. And we can deal with that after we recognize that that's the fact. There's plenty there to love in another person. But if they're wanting to be perfect, we're still trapped in our ego. We're still trying to center the narrative around ourselves. And that's usually a pretty unhappy gravel trail. So the first kind of thing I get out of this parable is that life is always a mixture of what we want and what we don't want. The second is that life is deeper than our humanity. The life within us, the biological life within us, the pulse within us is deeper than our human story. And it speaks a different language. Life speaks a different language. Life calls you to do things that your rational brain would never do. Does anybody know anybody that has ever gone bungee jumping? Now, to me, that's insane. But there are people who feel more alive when they climb mountains and this kind of thing, in recognition that life isn't forever, right? That you have to seize the day, you have to enjoy it, you have to give yourself to it. So there's a wisdom there too. You're not going to find me jumping from any high place ever, unless I was pushed. But look at salmon, for example, their lives. Here they spend their lives swimming upstream. They lay eggs and then die. If you only looked at their individual life, what a tragedy that would be. The beauty of it is when you look at the whole pattern. And I believe that's what the great spiritual teachers were trying to do. You are an individual, no question, but you're also a cell in the common body. And because you're going to die, it's very important to realize that your happiness, your beauty, comes from giving yourself to that process and not wishing that everything was stagnant and permanent. Because I guarantee that would not be a lot of fun for long. Life is a dance. Life is change. And we want it to stand still and be stagnant. We're really saying no to life. We're saying no to the dance. And this can be very, very sad. I've always liked Anne Lamott. She gets a lot of this stuff really well. Oops. She's talking about like wisdom and the lessons of life. She said, but you can't get to any of these truths by sitting in a field smiling beatifically, avoiding your anger and damage and grief. Your anger and damage and grief are the way to the truth. We don't have much truth to express unless we've gone into those rooms and closets and woods and abysses that we were told not to go into. When we have gone in and looked around for a while, just breathing and finally taking it in, then we will be able to speak in our own voice and to stay in the present moment. And that moment is home. When Jesus talks about the word, that's not a static human speech, not a noun. It's the process of change. It's the pulse of the universe, the pulse that's within your body. It's bringing those into harmony. So the first insight that I get from the parable is that life is a mixture of what we want and what we don't want. The second is that it's deeper, and we have to change how we think and speak to get in touch with the pulse of things. When we just look with our mind, when we just look with our social self, it seems like a paradox. It seems like a contradiction. It's only when we're truly alive do we realize that our living and our dying are not really two separate things. And that's a very important lesson to learn. Then the final thing is that our happiness, our wisdom, our joy depend on focusing on what we focus on. That if we can focus on love when we're surrounded by hate, there will be enough there for us. When we focus on wisdom, when everything around us is full of conspiracy theories, this just rejection of science, the rejection of reason, We can realize that, but not get lost in it. We are a social justice church. We recognize our obligation to stand up for other people. Last year, you let me go to Washington, D.C. to work on voters' rights. Pretty soon we're going to unleash is the wrong word, but we're going to launch. Thank you. Who said that? Oh, thank you. Everybody said that. Okay. It's sad you got the dumbest person to preach here. Everybody else. We're going to launch a defense of the families in Texas who are dealing with transgender children, who are also dealing with the bullying of the governor. We are going to have a very powerful program that we'll be announcing very, very soon, where you can be an ally to people being picked on. But we need to do that with everybody. But all of the people that are being used as scapegoats politically need people of faith to stand up with them against the people of faith who are saying something very different. So, what we focus on, the positive, the justice, it doesn't mean that you stop the struggle. But it means you know that the call to justice comes from love first. That's the foundation. If we don't start with love, we'll get caught in the storm. That love grows into justice, it grows into wisdom, it grows into courage. That's the foundation. But then we're able to express and do what we need to do without becoming depressed at the realities of the world. We can be so critical of other people, but we can even be more critical of ourselves. And we sit there and hack ourselves for our inadequacies. To realize all of us are a mixture of good and bad, of hope and fear, all of us. But if we focus on what's best within us, if we give ourselves to our highest value, that's going to be enough. That's planting the seed that changes the world. I think the parable today is just reminding us that we can get so busy pulling weeds that we forget to plant any wheat. Right? We can be so involved in fighting evil that we never live good. So busy combating hate that we forget our roots go into love. So, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, I'm almost done. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was somebody that studied the death process. And she had some amazing insights. This is one of them. She said, the most beautiful people we have known are those that have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. These persons have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep, loving concern. Beautiful people do not just happen. So my understanding of this parable is that we have to realize life is sweet and sour. If we only focus on the painful part, it will overcome us. If we only focus on the beautiful parts, we'll get derailed. So it's balancing the focus on the beautiful without ignoring that it's in tandem. Everything is in tandem. And then second, that life is deeper than our human thought. The universe is not nouns and verbs, as much as we would like it to be. It is what it is, and it's only when we join in the dance that we can really know what it is. And then finally, to remember when we do want to stand up for each other, that we can get so involved in chasing away the crows that we never plant any corn. Life is a beautiful, wonderful thing. If you go to Las Vegas, the cards are going to be dealt random. But a good gambler is going to beat me every time, right? We play bridge, the cards are random. But a good bridge player is going to beat me every time because they're focused on the pattern and because they say yes to the patterns of life and choose to give themselves to wisdom, to courage, to temperance, and to justice. Well, that's my understanding of this text. We'll set aside a moment now for you to think how you understand it.